I'm Keith Hartman, and I'm here interviewing
Pud Melius. I'm from Winthrop, Minnesota, and I never was so happy in all my life to be going to be inducted to the Minnesota Hall of Fame for baseball in September.
I'm Bill McGowan. I'm from Gibbon, Minnesota. I live in Fairfax now, and I was inducted in the Hall of Fame in 1964.
What's it like to be inducted to the Minnesota Baseball Hall of Fame?
Well, it's a funny thing. The people that get inducted in this Hall of Fame sometimes have to have a lot of support. So this one shocked me because I don't know who did some of the work to get me in there, because it's so many years of baseball, and I hate to go back all these years, but some of it slips by.
What about you? What's it like to be inducted into the Minnesota Baseball Hall of Fame?
Real happy to be inducted. We were inducted in the second year that they had the Hall of Fame. And the first time they inducted about 30 people, and Ted Peterson, the sport writer from St. Paul, picked all the people. They had the state tournament in New Ulm that year, and the Hall of Fame meeting was held there. And I didn't make the first team, and I made the second year that they had the Hall of Fame.
When did you first start playing baseball?
Here we go back so many years ago. We never even had baseball in high school. So I would say I played against some wonderful teams from Lafayette. It must be in the high 30s, like 38, 39, because I went in the service in 42. So it had to be within that time. And it was big baseball those days, too. And I got out in 1946, and then we started playing higher baseball in what we call the Western Minnesota League, and Mr. McGowan knows what that is. I played with Gibbon a few years, and then I had to go to Winthrop because I worked in Winthrop for a boss by the name of Armin Schutte, who was such a big baseball man. So I had to go and play against my home team for a while. I mean, Winthrop was the home team, but I played for this McGowan that we're talking to quite a few years, and I thought he did a wonderful job for us.
What about you, Bill? When did you first start playing baseball?
I played 4 years in high school in Morton. I came from Morton, Minnesota in 1931, and I played 4 years in high school. We had a real good coach. He was a right-handed first baseman. He played on a team that was a semi-pro team from St. Paul, the St. Paul Paper. And I played 1 year for Morton after that. I moved to Gibbon in 31. I graduated in 1927. I played against Pud's older brother all the time in high school. George, wasn't it George?
You're right.
Yeah.
You got a wonderful,
Yeah, we played basketball in high school and baseball, and we took the train from Morton to Winthrop. On the noon train, we went to the game in Winthrop, and we come back home in the night train.
When were you first involved with amateur baseball?
Amateur baseball, it got to the point where I would say way back in the 1938s when Lafayette played, and I remember Tanny Anderson, and so does Mr. McGowan. He was inducted in the Hall of Fame, and they had quite some pitchers over there, too. But the thing I want to mention about our Western Minnesota, and Mac will have to agree, we played against pitchers that were out of one was out of Columbus by the name of Claire Stroman. They're probably AAA pitchers, and they called our Western Minnesota there on the end with such valuable pitchers from the cities. We had a Dick Lanahan pitching for Sleepy Eye during Mac's days and my days. That was a pitcher with the St. Paul Saints at that time. And we had wonderful ball players, and it started to get there for a while in in the western Minnesota that we were allowed to hire or to get 3 ball players from colleges to help out our teams once in a while. So it maybe got a little bit away on, but we usually had to give them jobs, so it wasn't called professional ball. But like the one that I worked for, Armin Shooty, we had 3 ball players there. From one year we had them from the University of Oklahoma, national champs, some of the players, and from the following year we had some from the University of Michigan that were all national champions. So it got to be where we were allowed by the amateur rules that we gave them jobs that they would be called amateurs.
When were you first involved with amateur baseball?
In 1931. I came to Gibbon and they had a set ball club. I didn't make the ball club then. And I played for Morton for a couple of years. And then in 33 I started managing the Gibbon Ball Club, and I managed them till, for 15 years at least. And I became a regional commissioner, and I had baseball games all over the state of Minnesota after that, all the way out to from the Iowa border out to the South Dakota border.
Put on a lot of miles then, I'm sure.
Yeah, we got a nickel a mile. That was it.
Did you guys ever play against each other?
No, we have never played against each other, but he was my manager for at least 2 years that I know of. I'm trying to figure out if it's another year tacked in there somewhere. But I knew all the fellows at Mac, when he came to Gibbon, I knew a lot of those ball players because I played with them. They were still there after Mac got there in 1946 because I played it. I knew the Gibbon people just as well as I know the Winthrop people.
What did you think of Pud when he played for you?
He was a good ball player. I was the manager and he played shortstop, and I used to take infield after the infield did, and he always tried to knock me down, but he couldn't do it.
Who were some other good ball players that you played with?
Over at Gibbon, when I played with Gibbon, I remember Harry Pouts was the first baseman over there in Gibbon, and Mac does too. And I never seen a guy with the lousiest glove in all my times of baseball, but nothing got by him. And then as Jack Betcher, I got to know. That was another one from Gibbon, and Bob Schrader and Raleigh Frudenthal, and there's some Fredericksons that were on the team once in a while. So Gibbon, I knew real well the ball players. And Mac said I played short, and once in a while I played in the Westerns third and second or short, wherever they maybe needed the guy.
What about you, Mac? Who were some of the good ball players you played with?
A whole bunch of them. Mel Walters was probably the best pitcher I've ever had, and I had some Minneapolis pitchers that were real good. And Taft Mickelson was a big man, and he played first base. He was the Gibbon first baseman when I moved to Gibbon, and he was a good hitter, but he didn't feel much ground. But we had a lot of good ball players in them days. Raleigh Frudenthal was a good ball player. Bob Schrader was probably the best guy that ever moved to town. He pitched batting practice for us every night and could pitch on Sunday besides. And Earl Walters was our third baseman. We had a good ball club in them days. We went to Arlington, the first game we played in Arlington says a guy by the name of Nowak was playing third base for Arlington. He said, you can't beat us with that bunch of kids, and we beat them 4-0. So I started a bunch of kids, high school kids, in my first town team.
What was the first Major League Baseball game you went to?
I think maybe way back when I was stationed in Boston in the service. The first game I think I ever saw was at the old Green Monster, they call their ballpark, and they don't want to change that yet to this date. But that's when I first saw Ted Williams play Major League Ball. And in fact, I was so close I could have caught him running down to first base when he ran.
The first big league ball game, I think, was in St. Paul when the St. Louis Cardinals come in there to play an exhibition game. Then in '64, I went to the World Series. Morrill Anderson and I went to the World Series and seen 2 games between the Yankees and St. Louis. Them were the greatest games I ever seen. And we had tickets for Friday and Saturday, and the Yankees were 1 game away from winning, but St. Louis wasn't. Joe Pepitone hit a home run, so we got to see 2 games. But I see the St. Louis Cardinals in St. Paul before. They're my favorite ball club now.
All right. Who are some of the major league players you remember watching as a kid?
I watched one of the best pitchers that Cleveland ever had by the name of Herb Score. And the reason why I watched him because his catcher was a guy by the name of Jimmy Hegan. And this Jimmy Hegan was a catcher when I was stationed in the service, and I got to see him. And then, of course, I watched Herb Score because he's about the best pitcher outside of Bobby Feller, of course. Cleveland is one of the best pitchers I ever seen.
Who are some major league players that you remember watching as a kid?
I've always watched St. Louis a lot, and they had a big pitcher that pitched the day I was at the final game of the World Series, and he shut out the Yankees, and I think he was the best pitcher I ever seen.
Where did your town teams get their uniforms from and equipment?
Well, I think I can't remember too well where we got them, because the uniforms in my days, back in the 50s, were all woolen, heavy, warm, and everything else. Nowadays, they pick them up. Most everybody picks them up from Nicholson Athletic Company in New Ulm. Their uniforms are so much lighter and cooler and everything nowadays.
Where did your town teams get their uniforms from?
We did a lot of business with an outfit in Minneapolis, but after the war, we didn't have uniforms, we didn't have any bats, we didn't have any balls, and Raleigh Frudenthal, I went to the city, and we went to this store that sold this stuff, and I knew the general manager and the sales manager before the war, and I'd done some business with him, and we couldn't get a bat or a ball. The salesman kept telling us we don't have any, and I asked if I could see the manager, and he come out and he told me, well, just go home, we'll send you two dozen baseballs and 6 bats, and that's how we got started after the war.
Who was in charge of maintaining the baseball field when you guys played?
We had a fellow by the name of Henry Shower in Winthrop that was his pride and joy, though, to keep everything going down at the ballpark, the park, and that included the ballpark. He saw that things were done by himself, I guess. A fellow I'll never forget all the work that he did for the city of Winthrop.
Who maintained the field for your ballpark?
Well, the cop cut the grass in the outfield, but I did the rest of the work. Every Saturday afternoon, I had an old truck, and I went down and dragged a plank around the infield. We had a lot of rocks on our infield. Pud will tell you that, and after we dragged it, we had to pick up rocks. It was a little rough.
I think those days, people, after the war was over, that I never seen people going to so many ball games right after the war was over, which was, in my case, was back in, I went in 42 and came out 46, so in the neighborhood of 46. Well, I never seen so many people at ball games at that time. That was maybe just a little bit after the war was over back in 1942, but it seemed like they still had baseball in their minds. But those are some wonderful days. And that was right after the war, too.
How do you think the war affected baseball?
Well, it killed it to start with. We didn't have any baseball in Gibbon for 2 years. After the war, we come back and we started a new league. We had meetings in Fairfax once every 2 weeks for all winter. And before we got started, we started a new league. We called it the Indian Trail League. And I was elected president. I was president of that league for about 10 years. And we had 8 teams from around Gibbon and Fairfax, Franklin, all over. But it was hard getting started. But then I was a regional commissioner at that time, and I had, like Pud says, I had baseball games out in Madison, Minnesota, Ortonville, Dawson, and we had the biggest crowds. The first game we had in Madison, we had over 2,000 people. We lined them up inside the fence, about 5 deep. They sat on blankets. The grandstand was full. Ended up in a brawl, of course, between Madison and Appleton. We had a big time.
What's some advice you'd have for kids like me nowadays for baseball?
Well, Keith, now you're a sophomore in high school, do you? I don't know if you go out for baseball or not. Just try to be a good ball player, and some positions are what if a guy has got the ability at all, take up a position in baseball that's not so easy. I don't know what you play, Keith. What position do you play? Pitch. I think the best prospect to make a major league ball team is like Terry Stanback from New Ulm. The catchers are wanted so much all over the country, and the same way if a pitcher is left-handed, they're also wanted. So some of the best positions, if you like catching, I would advise anybody that they all can go into catching, of course, but just work hard and go to college.
What's some advice you'd have for kids now?
When I first moved to Gibbon in '31, we had the kids had 2 ballparks, and they were playing ball every afternoon. I was around one of the parks with the other, and that's where Harry Pouts and Raleigh Frudenthal and all them kids got. There wasn't any jobs for them, and they stuck around, and they played ball. And you don't see anybody playing catch anymore. Like when I was in high school, I played catch every night, or we played some kind of baseball every day.
I'd like to thank you guys for interviewing with us today. And is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think it's been good, and I agree with Matt. I can go back to my days and a little after Matt, that people would come down to our ballpark when we played ball, and we do so many fans and games. People would come down just to watch us practice in winter.
I'll tell you a story about my oldest grandson. He's 30 years old, and he was in church a week ago Sunday, and he was outside of the church talking to his dad. They don't live together anymore, and a little kid came up about 10 years old and said to him, "You're an engineer, aren't you?" My grandson said, "Yeah, I'm an engineer." "And why?" And he says, "Well, my dad's an engineer too." So my grandson says to him, "Well, are you going to be an engineer when you grow up?" And he said, "Heck no, I'm going to be a big league ball player."